Hey, what's up, guys? So I wasn't going to do this video because it's going to be hard for me. You'll see what I'm working with out here. It's going to be hard for me to like get you camera angles and let you see what I'm doing and talk and set everything up. It would take me forever. So I've got the transmission out. I've got the other transmission ready to go in. So what I'm going to do is, while I got the transmissions out, I'm going to show you some of the things that I think is important, some of the things that you may run into trouble doing if you do this job, or just show you what I got going on right here. You know, if for entertainment, or just in case if somebody's watching this and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to loosen the bell housing bolts on these because they can be a pain, how to remove a transmission, how to install a transmission, how to take off a shifter link, whatever. You know, I'm going to try to explain it all out here. So let me take you outside, show you what I'm working with, and try to explain some things that I think is important, some of the things that's hard for me, some of the things that I've had to ask about, you know. So let's go on out here and I'll show you what I got going on. All right, first thing I'm just going to show you is what I'm working with here. As you can see, I got this. It's an 02 Suburban, I believe. It's up on jack stands, and I've raised it up as high as I possibly can. As you can see, maybe all I'm using here is just some 6-ton Harbor Freight jack stands. I've had it set up here. You know, I don't have any issue using them. I've never had any problems using them. So I'm trusting my life using them. So if you was thinking about buying them, they're actually pretty decent. They're good. You know, they've never failed me yet. If they do fail me, then I'll probably not live to tell about it. So anyway, I just wanted to show you what I'm working with here, and we'll get over here and I'll explain a few of the things that I think is important for you. So come on over. Okay, now as you can see, we are outside, and I do live on a really busy road. So there may be some background noise. Now I do have my microphone here pointed away from the road towards me, hoping that helps a little bit because it is supposed to cancel out a lot of the noise from behind us. But I apologize beforehand for any sound issues we have with this video. I'm doing the best I can right now. You know, as you can see, I'm working with my driveway and some tools I got in the garage, you know, but everybody's got to start somewhere. So I'm doing what I can with what I got. So let's talk about the first thing I did here when I started doing this. I went through and disconnected all electrical connectors. And in this, there is an electrical connector. This will be on the passenger side, right up here in the top, above the transmission fluid pan. So pulled that out. All right, also on the driver's side, there's a bracket that bolts into right here. It's an 8mm bracket. I removed the bracket from this transmission, but if you look on this new transmission, the bracket is still on there. Now, what I'll do is when I put this in is I'm just going to remove this bracket, and I'll take my old bracket and I'll just put it directly back on, tighten the bolt back down, and it'll be good to go. But now if we look below this bracket on the driver's side, we see another bracket. This bracket holds your shifter link. It comes through here and catches to this, and this is what changes the gears in your transmission. As I said earlier, when you remove this, it just pulls directly off. It's not that hard, but like I said too, you do not want to try to like yank and force. Just take your time, work with it, get you a flathead screwdriver, stick up in there, twist it a little bit, go to the bottom, to the top. It'll come loose. It's not that big a deal. But there are 2 Torx bolts that hold this bracket in. They're T40s. Now you can't see the Torx bolts when the transmission's in the car or truck. So I waited until I lowered it down some, and then I just removed those and went on my merry way. Now, they do rust, so, and they are Torx bolts, so it's going to be hard. You could strip them out pretty easily. So heat them up and take your time with them. If you do run into the trouble and you strip them out, you could just take a pair of Cobra pliers, pair of vice grips, pair of anything, just get a hold of them and twist them out and put them back in. It's not that big a deal. It's just a bracket that's holding that on. So you could put it back down with anything. If you ruin the bolts, just find another bolt. I don't know what the size of the bolt is. It looks like maybe an M6 or something, but I can't tell you that off the top of my head. But if you did ruin them, I'm sure you could search online to find out what size they are. Just replace them. It's not that big a deal. All right, to remove this transmission, you're gonna have to take some bolts loose. You have to take the bell housing bolts loose. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't count, and I should have. I think it's 8 bolts that hold this thing in. And you have to watch out because the dipstick, which comes in on the passenger side, has a nut that holds that dipstick onto the stud, which is the bell housing bolt. Well, once you get that nut loose, you have to pull that dipstick bracket back, push it out of the way, and then behind that you need to loosen the bell housing bolt that's behind it. And it goes the same thing on the driver's side. There are your fuel lines that run up by your firewall and up towards your intake, and the bracket bolts into your bell housing bolt. You have to loosen that nut, pull that off, then you have to fight with it to get behind that to get the bell housing bolt off. It is a pain. This is the hardest part of this, is getting these bell housing bolts loose. Now there are little things you can do, little tricks you can do. Now the bottom ones you can get with a wrench or a ratchet and a socket pretty easily. And then even the side ones you can get for the most part, but I'm gonna show you a couple things that if you don't have, you probably wanna try to get to try to help you get these bolts loose real quick. Okay, one of the first things that will help you when you're doing this is to buy you a set of these. They're long ratcheting flex head wrenches. Now this particular set is called Mountain. Now you can buy these on the tool truck, and they do cost a bit on the tool truck, but I'm gonna link them down below on Amazon, and you can get them, I can't remember exactly, but it's not very much, $100 and something for a set of 5 of them, I believe. And they come with like 19 on this side, 17 on this side, and so forth. It's worth it. If you don't own these, go ahead and buy them. I'm telling you, they come in handy in all types of situations. They're long, so you can get good leverage on the fastener you're trying to loosen. And as I said, they're reversible ratcheting wrenches. So if you want my opinion, man, buy these. If you have the extra money at any time, even if you're not planning on using them, just go ahead and get them, have them in your arsenal, ready to go. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is a set of impact swivel sockets. Now, this particular set here is a pinless set, and I don't know what the difference is really between pinless and not pinless, besides obviously this doesn't have a pin in it. As what I mean by I don't know is that I don't know like the advantage of having pinless, besides maybe that the pinless are stronger and last longer, but with them being lifetime warranty, I don't really consider that a deciding factor when buying these. But when I did buy these, I needed them at the time, and this is the only set on the truck. And this particular set here, if you're ready for this, costs $585. They are made in the USA, and they are a lifetime warranty, but $585 for 10 sockets. So we're looking at $58.50 per socket. That is pretty expensive. And they do have a cheaper set, but at the time they didn't have it available, so I had no choice but to get these. I don't regret getting them, but I would have liked to got the pin set, because a pin or a pinless doesn't matter to me, man. What matters to me is keeping money in my pocket, but I do have them, so I'm using them. And now the advantage of these is how stiff they are. They'll hold when you're, a lot of these bolts, which I'll show you, not a lot of them, a couple of these bolts, which I'll show you, you have to actually snake with a couple long extensions or a big long extension from the back, almost where the transfer case is, or almost back to where the rear tire is in a 2-wheel drive car, and snake up there, and you have to aim and get it over top of the bolt and take the bolt loose. So it is a pain, and with these being stiff, it does help a lot, because I'm going to show you the next thing you can use And this is where you'll find out real soon how the stiff factor comes into play when you try to use this. This is just a swivel extension. Now, when you put a socket on the end of this, this thing will just lay flat, limp. Just, I mean, just it sucks when you're up there and you're snaking up in there and your socket's laying like this. So you try to turn and try to shake, and then it goes the other way. It's really a pain, and you know, it's a pain, man. So I'm going to show you a little trick here that if you only have these, that you can do to help stiffen it up. And also, I'll say before I show you this, the impact swivel sockets I just shown, I will link a set below. That's a pretty good set, a Gearwrench set, and I'll probably try to find another set I can link to, that if you're looking for a set, you can go ahead and get them, because I'm telling you, I would also recommend that you do get you a set of swivel impact sockets the moment you have the money and don't need anything else, because if you are working on stuff, you're gonna need them at some point. So now just say, for instance, you're stuck with this and you're trying to get it up there and it's limp, it's not working. This is what you could do to harden it up a little bit, stiffen it up. You just take you a little duct tape, wrap it around the swivel extension and your socket when you have it attached as well, because that way it'll also act as keeping the socket in place in case you're trying to go up and it snags on something and it pops loose, which I've had happen a million times. But just putting this little bit of duct tape on here stiffens this thing up. And once you get to the point to where you can finally get on there and you push it on there and you start hitting it with the impact, it will break this tape loose. So you may have to try it a few times if you can't get it the first time. But just doing this little trick right here, man, will help you and save you a lot of time. I guarantee that. So let me just show you real quick. I'm going to show you the two bolts, the two hardest bolts to get on this, and where they are on the bell housing, the three hardest bolts on the bell housing, where they are, and exactly what you're going to need to do to get to these the best I can without being able to show you in action. So let's go on back over here and let me show you. Okay, so there's three bolts that's going to be the biggest pain for you when you're doing this job. The first bolt is going to be right here, directly up in the center, and you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't do anything, man. This is the only thing you can do really, is you're going to have to lay towards the back passenger side, look up in there until you can see it. Then from then on, you're going to have to use the trick I just showed you with the swivel extension, or use your swivel impact sockets and snake all the way up through there, which, by the way, let me just say that the size of these are a 15 millimeter, 14 millimeter in some cases, or 9/16. So those are the sizes that you're going to need. If you was interested in buying the impact swivel sockets for this job but didn't want to buy a whole set, you could just buy a 14 and a 15 and be able to get by with it, with what you need it for at this moment, to save you a little bit of money. But this one here, like I said, you're going to have to lean all the way back on the passenger side, almost back by the rear wheel. You'll look up in there. Once you can find it, you're going to take a long 3/8 extension, a couple of them, and you're going to snake it up over the top of the transmission and get to this bolt and knock it loose. Now, that one is actually not that bad to get to. You can actually get a pretty good shot at it once you get down there and you look and you can see it's not that bad. Now, these two bolts here, as you can see here, this is actually broken here, but where the dowel pins are, you have a dowel pin here and a dowel pin on this side. There are two bolts, as I said. One has a fuel line bracket on and the other has the dipstick bracket on it. They have a nut on one side and a stud on the actual bolt on the other side. So once you remove the nut, you have to pull the bracket off, then get to the actual bell housing bolt. So to get these, you have to do the same thing I just said with the top bolt. You're going to need to look for it, get you a swivel, put it up in there and bang it. Now, before you even do any of this, I'm going to recommend that if you're working on a 4-wheel drive, you need to remove the transfer case from the start. Now, even before, like, I remove the transfer case and then I'll remove the cross member and the Y pipe on this. You are going to have to remove the cross member and the Y pipe if you're working like I'm working here. If you have a lift, you may be able to snake it up in there without removing the cross member and the Y pipe, but to save you some time, man, just go ahead and remove it, get it out of the way, and deal with putting it back in later, because pulling this down, trying to snake it around, especially down here like I am, you need as much room as possible. So I removed the transfer case, pull that out of the way. To remove the transfer case, you need to remove these bolts back here. There is 6 bolts. So you remove these 6 bolts, get the transfer case up out of the way. Now when you go to put it back in, you're probably, if you don't have a gasket, you can just use some RTV right here, but you are going to have to use RTV or have a gasket available before you put the transfer case back onto this. And if you use some RTV, man, always set the RTV up, let it set for a minute, and then install your part or whatever you're installing. Don't just slap it straight on, because it's going to be wet. It's not going to seal how you need it to seal. So I'll always use the RTV. I'll let it set for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'll install my part. And it always seems to work better for me. You know, you may have different experiences. You know, you may think I'm dumb for saying that, but that's, if, just trust me, just let it set up for a little bit. So you remove your transfer case, then you're going to remove your cross member and your Y pipe. You get them out of the way. Now, once you have your transmission loose, you're going to want to use a jack, a transmission jack, or as you see, I'm just using a jack with a 2x4, and I will actually jack my transmission up when I remove it all. And then once I have it removed, I'll actually lower my transmission down lower than where it sets while it's in the car. But before I do that, I always take and put a 2x4 with another jack underneath my oil pan on my engine, just to keep it from hitting up front and damaging the oil pan. So I'll allow it to rest just above the cross member up front, and then I'll lower my transmission down, and that does give me a little bit more room above my firewall to get the bolts out that I need to get out. So that's another tip and trick that you could use to get these bolts out. But the bottom bolts are easy to get to, and the top bolts are the ones that's going to give you the most trouble and the most pain. And trust me, I understand it's not easy. All right, I shot talking about this a couple days ago, and I haven't published it yet, so I kind of wanted to go into detail a little more and go over a couple things I didn't talk about before while I got it out. And so I threw it up on the table here, so that way we could get a better look at it. I brought it inside. We could get away from all the noise in the outside, and I can show you in more detail what I was talking about and maybe give you an example of a lot of the stuff I was talking about. So first thing I want to talk about is where these transmission lines go in. We talked before about pulling the clip out, then pulling the line out. Well, I'm going to put up a picture of what the clip looks like, because I actually have the clips already back in there and the lines are already in. Now, another trick that you could do is take the clips and put the clips back in. Once you remove the clips, while you're removing the clips, be careful you don't lose them, because they will fly. But once you get them out, you pull the lines out. When you're putting your new transmission in or hooking your old transmission back up, whatever you're doing, have the clips already in, and all you have to do at that point is push the lines in. Now, they may be a little hard to go in, but they will go in. Just try to get them straight and push them in. And another thing I didn't mention is there's actually a plastic sleeve over top of the transmission lines. Make sure once you put the line back in that you pull the sleeve back over top of the clip on both lines. And obviously, in reverse would work. When you're taking it out, you want to pull the plastic piece off It'll just slide down the line, get it out of the way, pull the clip, pull the line, put the clip back. And also on the top here, there's going to be a vacuum line. Now you can wait until you lower the transmission down and pull the vacuum line, because there is a little hose clamp that'll sit over top of the line. You can just pull that hose clamp, pull it back, and the line will pull off. You can see here where it's a little rusty, so it may be a little stuck, but I'm sure a lot of you dealt with stuck lines before. If you haven't dealt with stuck lines before, a thing that I like to try is just get a pair of pliers and be careful not to damage the line. Just grab a hold of it and twist, and usually that'll break it free. If it doesn't break it free, then you can try to get you a pick, run it down inside the hose, go all the way around, just break it free from the rust. And with this line here, it wouldn't be so critical if I did damage it a little, because I could just cut a little bit off because there's plenty of line, and just put it right back over top of it. All this is a vent line, so it's nothing really important. Another thing is, when you pull the dipstick tube out, right here is a rubber grommet that the right here is a rubber grommet that the dipstick tube slides down into, and when it comes up, it'll actually be attached to a bracket to your bell housing bolt. You'll have to loosen a nut. You pull the nut, then you can get something in there and pull it off, and that's the only way you can get to the bell housing bolt to remove the transmission anyway. But make sure when you go to put your new transmission in, or when you put your old transmission back in, whatever the case may be, make sure this rubber grommet is in there. As you can see here, make sure it's in the transmission, because if you just slide that dipstick tube down in there, when you go to add your fluid and you start it up, it's going to pour out, and you're going to be wasting fluid. You're going to have a mess to clean up. Then you're going to have to maybe unattach the tube again. So just save yourself some time. Make sure that grommet is in there. Okay, here we can get a look at the torque converter. When I recorded the video a couple days ago, I talked about how to make sure that this torque converter is seated all the way back, because if not, you will damage your pump. Now, right behind this, if we were rebuilding this, which I actually wouldn't mind rebuilding this, but I don't know the guy's plans. But I know he is going to want it rebuilt, but I don't know if he's going to want me to do it, if he's going to do it, or what's going to go on. But I actually wouldn't mind rebuilding it just for fun. You know, obviously I want to get paid for it, but I wouldn't even charge that much, just because I would actually like to do it. I've never really done it, so I know I could. You know, I'm mechanically inclined enough to figure it out, and what I don't know, I can research or ask friends, whatever I got to do, man. I'm not afraid to ask anybody, and I'm already familiar with a lot of the parts on the inside, so I'm pretty confident I could do it. But let me show you what I'm talking about by seating this torque converter back. I've intentionally pulled it forward a little bit, and if I were to go install this into the car, truck, whatever, as is right now, then this would cause the damage to the pump that I'm talking about. We'd be pulling it back out, and we'd be replacing the pump, which I don't think would be too hard to do, but still I don't want to do it, and I don't want to pay for it. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. When I press in, nothing happens really. So watch what happens. What you do is you're going to press in, and as you're pressing in, you're going to want to turn, and there it goes. Now it's completely locked into place, and it's not much movement, so you could miss it and think that it's in. So you're going to give it a couple more turns just to be 100% sure. You'll hear the click just like you just did. So I'm satisfied. That's all the way back, and I would go ahead and install it. But when you're installing this, you do need to be careful, because this does move easy. It will slide out fairly easily, especially when you're doing it like I was doing it with a jacking it up. There's a lot of movement, so it could wiggle itself loose, but just like that. So before I go to lift it up one final time, I'm going to check again to make sure that it's seated back, and once I get it to the top, I'm going to pull back a little bit, and I'm going to reach up there and just try to give it a couple turns the best I can, just to make sure that it's seated. And then when you put it up in there, this is another tip. You're going to come up through your starter area right here, which is the only way to get these bolts out and the only way to install these bolts. So you get your starter back out of the way. It's just 2 bolts. Comes up. They actually bolt directly into the engine. So you'll get those bolts out, and there's obviously 2 wires attached to them too. And if you want to try to leave those connected, there's nothing wrong with it. Try to just push it out of the way. Try to hold it with a bungee cord or something to try to prevent it, because it will fall at some point maybe. And you could break your wires. Then you're going to be dealing with that as well. So just try to keep it up out of the way. Try to keep it from falling. But you'll come up through here, and this is where the mountain wrenches that I showed you before come in handy, because you're up underneath. You'll come up and you can get to it. You can get some good torque on it to remove or to install. And you're also going to have to hold either your harmonic balancer, or you're going to have a tool that'll hold your flex plate in place. So, but when you're going back to install this, this is a tip, man. Just take with your fingers, once you get it lined up, get the bolt, put it in, and just make it hand tight. Don't even try to tighten it with a wrench at all. Just hand tight. Don't force it. Once you get it hand tight, now when you turn the harmonic balancer, it will turn the torque converter with it. Before you do, you'll have to try to line up, get your hole lined up on your flex plate, and then you get up in here and you'll turn this to match behind it. Now you have it hand tight. Now you turn it. You're going to come to your next hole, hand tight. Next hole, hand tight. 4L60 only has 3 bolts holding in the flex plate to the torque converter. A 4L80 has 6 bolts. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it is 6 bolts. So if you're dealing with this transmission, then you're only looking for 3 bolts. But the reason that you're only going to hand tight these is because there is just a little bit of play in between the flex plate and the torque converter. So if you go just crank this down on the first try, you're going to turn this around only to find out that your bolt hole doesn't line up. So then you'll be going back around, loosening it up, starting over. So just do it hand tight. Once you get it hand tight, then you can go back and tighten them, tighten each one individually to either the specified torque or really tight. And another thing, man, is make sure that you use Loctite, some thread sealer, something, man. You do not want to install this without some Loctite. I mean, you got to imagine how much vibration and how many times this thing's turning over the course of this engine's life or until it's removed again. So these bolts could come loose pretty easily. If you watch my video, this is one of my first videos. I'm sure 99.9% of you guys have never even seen it. But I actually, when I bought my Chevy truck, I was having trouble with the starter. It was not wanting to catch. Sometimes I would have to crank the key 10, 20 times to even have it engage the flex plate. And I could never figure out why. I kept looking and looking and looking. Couldn't figure it out. So I actually was going to do my head gaskets on it. So I pulled the engine. And when I pulled the engine out to do the head gaskets, which I videotaped all this, I got everything done. And when I got to the back to put it back together, I realized, and even once I had it out, I didn't notice anything. I didn't notice what was going on. I couldn't figure out why. It was only catching the front of the teeth on the flex plate. And the reason it started getting worse and worse and worse to the point to where I could barely start the truck is because it had done ate the front of all those teeth off. So it almost had nothing to catch to. Because when it's for a starter to work, once you engage it, man, it shoots out a sprocket. And that sprocket will engage the teeth to your flex plate. And it turns with tremendous force and speed to basically kickstart your engine. So it was only able to hit the front part of it. And so I couldn't figure out why. Well, come to find out, man, because the engine is actually a crate engine that somebody had put in there before I owned the truck. So whoever put this engine in, whoever put this flex plate on, they actually put the flex plate on backwards, and I'm going to show you the actual flex plate. This is the actual flex plate that came out of the truck, and the teeth are 8 up on the outside. But if you look where the bolts bolt into the back of your crankshaft right here, if you look, it's actually pressed out on one side and pressed in on the other side. So when they installed this, they had it sucked the wrong way, and the flex plate was pushed out away from the engine too far to when the sprocket came out of the starter, it was barely catching any of these teeth. So it eventually got to the point to where, like I said, I could barely start my truck. So I had to replace it, and that could be pretty easy to do if if you never done it before or was in a hurry or messed up. Anything could happen, man. But I would have never found that out if I wouldn't have removed the engine to do the head gaskets and to look at it from the back, man, because I was down there, I bought a new starter, I tried that, I tried everything, and nothing I tried worked. So if it wasn't for me being able to get a look at it from the back, I may have never figured that out, because I never would have even crossed my mind that somebody put the flex plate on backwards. So if you ever run into that trouble, man, maybe you'll now can use my misfortune to your benefit to know that, hey, maybe somebody put the flex plate on backwards. The last thing I want to talk about, neutral safety switch. And this is why this transmission is still sitting in my house. And this is why I have it up on my table, besides to show you. I actually could have did this on the ground, but I want to show you. I figured it'd be easier. We could take a better look at it together. So first thing we'll talk about is why I still have this. If we look here on the back, there's actually 2 plug-ins that plug in to the neutral safety switch. There's actually 2 different style neutral safety switch. One is just one big plug-in. This is 2 plug-ins. The transmission I put in is actually from a 04. I'm not sure what, but it has one big plug-in on the neutral safety switch. So I don't have the plug-in to put it in there. So I'm actually going to try to remove this to put it onto the new transmission that I just put into the truck. But I'm running into trouble removing it because the selector shaft right here, there's actually a nut that comes on this. This is real easy to remove. There's 2 13mm bolts, one here, and there's one, I believe, is a 15mm nut that holds this on, and it'll actually go over. This actually goes over like this, and the nut holds this in, and this is where your shifter cable attaches to. Now, selector shaft, hence the name, it selects the gears that your engine is in. For instance, right now we're in park, it's all the way forward, and I can change the gears to this transmission by clicking this, reverse, neutral, all the way down to first gear, second gear, drive, and so forth. So that's just a little, just in case you didn't know. I'm sure most of you guys already knew that, but let me tell you the issue that we have here is that these neutral safety switches that slide, this just slides directly over the selector shaft, but they will seize to that selector shaft. And if I go to try to force this off, it will be no good. And the guy's actually pricing one now because I'm having trouble getting it off and I don't want to break it. Now, a trick that you can try to do, which I've tried to do, which I haven't had too much luck with, is file down around this. And then, because a lot of times it'll build up a rust ring, which is exactly what it's done. And it won't allow this to come forward. If I try to force it forward, then I'm going to ruin this switch and I'll be buying another one. So I'm trying to do everything I can to try not to ruin this switch, because I'm obviously trying to save them money and I'm obviously trying to do the best job I can for this guy. So I'm going to try to get it off. But as I said, I'm not having too much luck, but I'm going to keep working on it. And it benefited you as well. Maybe, hopefully, you got to hang out with me, and maybe you're actually watching this video to learn how to replace this transmission. And if you are, man, I wish you luck. If you have any questions, you could just hit me in the comments, and I will try to help you. I don't care if it's 10 years from now, if you see this video and you post a question, man, I'll try to answer it for you, hopefully, if I see it. But if I don't, it's not because I'm ignoring you. Believe that. One last thing, these plug-ins, a lot of times they're glued in. You can ruin them trying to pull them out. So here's what you could try to do. There's two things, man. First thing is, go ahead and just remove these two bolts. File this down and see if you can't just pull this off while it's in the vehicle. Leave it in the vehicle. That would be ideal. But as I said, a lot of times it may seize on there. And if you're unable to do that, man, here's another thing you can do. Just take a regular cigarette lighter. Be careful, obviously. Take a regular cigarette lighter and heat up around this. You don't want to melt it, obviously. All you're trying to do is just heat it up enough to melt that glue. And you should be able to pull these wires out. Hopefully it works for you, but don't force it. Don't break them. Just keep working with them. Like I said, if you can, just leave it in there. But I'm going to go ahead and just send this back to the other video. I just wanted to add a few things in and maybe go into detail a little more and show you an example, because I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a visual learner. I like to see somebody do it. Most of the time, if I see somebody do something, man, I can do it. If I can't do it after watching them do it, then if they help me do it, then 99.9999% of the time, man, I can do it afterwards. You know, I'm not trying to, be cocky or anything, but, I am confident in my abilities, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well. If not, you should be, man. I believe that we all should be confident in what we could do. So, with that being said, let's get back to the video, man. Appreciate it. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this, man. Like I said, I would have liked to have shown you firsthand exactly what was happening, but I just wanted to talk about it and try to just, I figured it was just, some of this stuff was just too important for me not to talk about, because I don't know a lot of this stuff, man. And, I have friends and I ask them and they help me, and then I learn, and then I can help the next person. So, so I'm going to go ahead and end this. Like I said, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. If you have any questions, man, leave them in the comments. I'll try to help, man. I want to help everybody. I enjoy doing this. I just took some time out to do this because I felt like it was just too important to not do it. There may be somebody looking, somebody wanting to know, and somebody needing help, man. And so hopefully I helped you. Hopefully I entertained you, man. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I appreciate it if you go down and subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to be doing more videos like this, including projects, tips, tricks, tool reviews, and a lot more. So the best is yet to come, man. I appreciate you watching. Till next time, stay real.